I believe we are lucky enough to witness the worst tech predictions in history. For the past few years, all we heard from tech CEOs is that AI is changing everything and AGI is right around the corner. Whenever I post a Skeptic AI video, my comment section is filled with comments stating that AI right now is the worst it'll ever be and that it just needs 6 more months to blow our minds. These AI CEOs' predictions get crazier by the day, so this got me thinking about other terrible predictions tech leaders made over the years. It's really important to understand that even the guys who have access to infinite resources, insider data, and entire research divisions are still consistently wrong about the future. What's more important is that forecasts may tell you a great deal about the forecaster, but they tell you nothing about the future. In other words, nobody really knows what the future looks like, and these predictions usually have an ulterior motive. These CEOs are not stupid, but all their statements have a hidden agenda, tightly coupled with their financial interests. So on this Monday morning review, we'll look at how confidently wrong these guys really are. In 2007, for instance, Steve Ballmer, the then CEO of Microsoft, was asked for his reaction to the newly announced iPhone. His answer: there's no chance that the iPhone is going to get any significant market share. No chance. It's a $500 subsidized item. In Ballmer's defense, at that time, $500 was an astronomical price for a phone when competitors were often free or $99 with a contract. However, he didn't anticipate Apple's business model innovation, where they worked with carriers like AT&T to bake the cost of the phone into the monthly service bill. On the other hand, Microsoft was blinded by its own success. Ballmer, with all its access to research and data, could not see a world beyond the QWERTY keyboard. He called the iPhone a not very good email machine. Now, 20 years later, 1 in 5 people has an iPhone, and Microsoft abandoned the idea to compete in this space. And, since we are discussing Microsoft, at the World Economic Forum in 2004, Gates stated that 2 years from now, spam will be solved. This goes to show that even problems that appear simple on the surface might actually be way more difficult to solve than one would expect. And this goes beyond the tech world. For instance, the man managed to land on the moon, if you choose to believe that, but humankind still can't solve the problem of the simple flu virus. Back to Gates, he believed that a combination of sender ID authentication and computational puzzles would make spamming too expensive to continue. Instead, spammers got more sophisticated, using botnets of infected computers to bypass these hurdles. Today, spam still accounts for roughly 45 to 50% of all global email traffic. This is a classical example of a cognitive bias where an individual's subjective confidence in their judgments, knowledge, or skills exceeds their objective accuracy. Gates built one of the biggest tech companies in the world and shaped personal computing and the internet. Naturally, he thought that he understood the spam problem, but he didn't. And, since I mentioned the personal computer, back in 1977, Ken Olsen, the founder of one of the biggest microcomputer companies of that time, stated that there is no reason anyone would want a computer in their home. Ken Olsen was the co-founder and CEO of Digital Equipment Corporation, a company that, at its peak, was second only to IBM in the computer industry. DEC built mini-computers, which are room-sized by today's standards, but revolutionary at the time. They powered universities, research labs, and various serious businesses. Olsen couldn't see the personal computer as a different class of object. The irony is that DEC engineers actually did experiment with early personal computers. The ideas were there, but their business model didn't support it. So you might be a titan in the industry and have the solution stare you right in your face, and you could still be completely wrong. And this could happen even to experienced inventors who are not actually aware of the implications of the thing they created. In 1995, Robert Metcalfe, who co-created the Ethernet and founded the 3Com company, predicted that the Internet will soon go spectacularly supernova and in 1996 catastrophically collapse. Metcalfe understood networking better than almost anyone alive at the time, and he was still wrong. In the mid-90s, the Internet was growing exponentially on top of protocols that were never designed for global consumer scale. Bandwidth was scarce, routing tables were exploding, and congestion control was primitive. From a systems perspective, the whole thing looked fragile. Metcalfe assumed growth would expose these weaknesses faster than they could be fixed, but he underestimated the speed at which incentives forced systems to evolve. Protocols evolved, hardware got cheaper, and fiber replaced copper. Engineers fixed problems incrementally, under pressure, in production, while the system was already running. And here is your awesome trivia of the day, this time with a jingle.
Awesome trivia in 10 seconds.
Metcalfe famously promised to eat his words if he was wrong. And in 1997, during a keynote speech, he wanted to do just that literally. He offered to eat a cake decorated like his article, but the audience rejected that symbolic gesture. He then put a copy of his article in a blender with some liquid and actually ate the resulting pulpy mixture in front of the audience. This proves once again that the 90s were the golden age of humanity. The internet revolution caught even Nobel-winning economists off guard. In 1998, Paul Krugman stated that by 2005 or so, it will become clear that the internet's impact on the economy has been no greater than the fax machines. Krugman was an MIT professor whose job was to analyze the structural changes of the global economy. He looked at the data available in the late 90s and saw that despite the hype, productivity growth hadn't spiked. He argued that most of what people did on the internet was just a digital version of what they were already doing via newspapers, telephones, and fax machines. He viewed the internet as a marginal improvement in communication speed, not a fundamental shift in how value is created. This is the trap of linear thinking. He assumed that because the internet hadn't revolutionized the economy in its first few years, it never would. He failed to see that the fax machine was a point-to-point tool, while the internet was a platform for permissionless innovation, and that sending text over the internet would evolve into online shopping, media, streaming, and so much more. And even seasoned innovators might fall in this trap. Or do they? In 2001, almost a decade before the iPad actually made tablets a thing, Bill Gates stood on a stage at the Comdex trade show and held up a prototype of the Microsoft tablet PC, stating that within 5 years it will be the most popular form of PC sold in America. Gates saw the tablet PC as the logical evolution of the laptop. It ran a full version of probably the best operating system ever created, Windows XP, the infamous stylus for digital ink, and it was supposed to bridge the gap between paper and silicon. But the hardware was heavy, the battery life was abysmal, and the software wasn't actually built for touch. It was just regular Windows with tiny buttons that you had to poke with a plastic stick. 5 years later, in 2006, tablet PCs accounted for less than 1% of all PC sales. And even today, when tablets are lean, powerful and useful, the global usage of tablets is still under 2%. But this marks an interesting shift in predictions, because CEOs are starting to become overly optimistic in their predictions, trying to shift the public perception in the right direction. In the same line, in 2003, Steve Jobs said that the subscription model of buying music is bankrupt. I think you could make available the second coming in a subscription model, and it might not be successful. Now, this is where things get more interesting, because Jobs' aim was to protect the billion-dollar empire he had just finished building. At that time, Apple had just launched the iTunes Music Store and the iPod and managed to convince record labels, artists and users to agree on paid digital music. Their entire business model was built on ownership. A subscription model was an existential threat to that setup. So just like some are promising that self-driving cars will be 90% autonomous in the next year, and others are promising that AI will write 90% of the code in the next year, Jobs was simply trying to push things in a direction that was commercially convenient for him. So next time you hear people confidently making predictions about AI or anything else, just ignore them. Far smarter, more informed, and better prepared people tried to predict the future based on more data and more expertise, and they were still 100% wrong. If you liked this video, you should consider joining our community where I'm posting more dedicated content. Please don't forget to smash all the buttons, and until next time, thank you for watching.